She rejected you. The words were clear. Maybe her voice was soft, tinged with regret. Maybe she looked away, hesitant to meet your eyes. Or perhaps she was firm, decisive, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Whatever the tone, the message was unmistakable: no. In that moment, you felt the weight of it. The sting of disappointment, the rush of emotions, hurt, confusion, maybe even anger. And yet, instead of reacting, instead of speaking, you did something most people can't: you stayed silent. Not a word. Not a plea. Not a question or rebuttal. Just silence. At first, she may have felt relief. Your lack of response seemed easy, uncomplicated. She didn't have to explain herself further or navigate a flood of emotions from you. But as the silence stretched on, something began to shift. What initially felt like relief slowly turned into an unsettling awareness. Because your silence isn't just an absence of words, it's a presence. A presence that forces her to confront something she didn't expect: herself. The power of silence. Silence, when used with intention, is one of the most powerful tools you have. It's not passive, it's active. It's a statement that says, "I hear you. I respect your decision. But I also respect myself." When you stay silent after rejection, you're doing more than avoiding conflict, you're showing strength. Most people would react emotionally, either trying to argue their case or retreating into bitterness. But by choosing silence, you rise above those impulses. You demonstrate control over your emotions and a deep sense of self-worth. Your silence isn't weak. It's not avoidance. It's a refusal to engage in desperation, to lose yourself in the moment. And that's what makes it so powerful. It creates a space where you maintain your dignity and allow her to sit with her own thoughts. What happens to her? At first, she may not think much of your silence. She might assume you're simply processing her decision, or that you've accepted it without resistance. But as the hours turn into days, that silence begins to weigh on her. She starts to wonder. Why didn't you react? Why didn't you fight for her, argue your case, or at least express your feelings? She expected something, anything, but what she got was calm, dignified silence. And that's when the real power of your choice starts to take effect. Because now, instead of focusing on your reaction, she's left to focus on herself. Your silence gives her space to think, not just about her decision, but about you. It forces her to reflect on what she said, why she said it, and what it might mean. And in that reflection, doubts begin to creep in. Doubts and realizations. She begins to question, did I make the right choice? Was I too quick to dismiss him? Your silence amplifies these thoughts because it creates contrast. Most people, when faced with rejection, react impulsively, pleading, arguing, or withdrawing in anger. But you didn't. Instead, you left her with nothing but the weight of her own decision. And in that void, she starts to remember. She thinks about the moments you shared, the ways you made her feel, the energy you brought into her life. She begins to see things she may have overlooked in the moment: your kindness, your confidence, your presence. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back her own feelings and choices. It's not about guilt or manipulation, it's about giving her the space to truly understand what she might be losing. Why she wants you back. As time passes, she starts to feel the absence of your presence more acutely. Silence isn't just the lack of noise, it's the lack of connection. And that lack begins to highlight what you brought into her life. She begins to crave the stability and strength you've shown. Your silence wasn't a retreat, it was a demonstration of self-respect. It showed her that you're not someone who clings, who begs, or who diminishes yourself for the sake of someone else's affection. This realization draws her back because it sets you apart. In a world full of people chasing after validation, your ability to stand still, to remain calm, and to honor both her decision and your own worth is magnetic. She begins to wonder, what kind of person can react this way? Someone who knows their value. Someone who doesn't need to fight for love because they know love must be mutual. And that's when she starts to miss you, not because you pushed her to, but because she sees your worth in a way she hadn't before. Why silence works? Silence is powerful because it shifts the focus. It forces her to confront her feelings, her doubts, and her choices. It's not about playing games or manipulating emotions, it's about creating space for reflection. When you stay silent, you're not just avoiding unnecessary conflict, you're allowing her to see you clearly. You're giving her the opportunity to realize what she may have overlooked, your strength, your dignity, your value. And here's the most important part, your silence isn't a tactic to win her back. It's a declaration of self-respect. It's a way of saying, I value myself enough to walk away if that's what you want. But I won't lower myself to prove my worth, because I already know it. This is what makes silence so powerful. It's not about trying to control her feelings, it's about demonstrating that your own feelings are grounded, steady, and unshaken by rejection. What happens next? If she reaches out, it will be because she chose to. Not because you begged or pleaded, but because she saw your worth in the quiet space your silence created. And if she doesn't, it's because she wasn't meant to stay. Either way, your silence ensures that you remain true to yourself, strong, grounded, and worthy. Because in the end, silence isn't the absence of action. It's the loudest declaration of confidence you can make. And that kind of confidence? It's unforgettable. Underneath the silence, there's an unseen strength, a power that she begins to feel as the days stretch on. At first, she might brush it off, thinking your lack of response was indifference. But slowly, that silence becomes heavier. It starts to whisper questions she can't ignore. Why didn't you fight for her? Why didn't you argue, explain, or even try to convince her otherwise? Most would have. Most would have tried to win her back, to make her feel guilty, or to at least demand answers. But you didn't. And that unsettles her. She starts to realize that your silence wasn't an absence of feeling, it was the presence of self-respect. It wasn't a lack of care, it was the mark of someone who values themselves enough not to beg for what isn't freely given. In that quiet, she begins to feel the weight of your absence. It's not loud or dramatic, it's subtle but undeniable. She starts to notice how much space you occupied in her life, how your presence brought a sense of stability, of calm, of something she can't quite name but now realizes she misses. And here's the secret, silence isn't just about what it says, it's about what it leaves unsaid. It creates a void, a blank space where her own thoughts, feelings, and doubts rush in to fill the gap. And in that space, she starts to remember the moments she may have overlooked. The way you listened, the way you supported her, the way you never demanded more than she was willing to give. She begins to see you differently, not as someone who was rejected, but as someone who stood tall in the face of rejection. Someone who didn't crumble, didn't lash out, didn't lose themselves. And that strength? It's magnetic. Silence forces her to confront something she may have ignored in the moment, that losing you isn't as easy as she thought it would be. This is the power of silence. It doesn't push or pull, it simply exists. It allows her to see, without interference, the kind of person you are. And in seeing that, she starts to realize something else, that your silence isn't about her. It's about you. It's about the boundaries you've set, the dignity you refuse to compromise, the self-worth that remains unshaken. The more time passes, the more this realization grows. And eventually, she'll find herself at a crossroads. The choice is no longer about you, it's about her. It's about whether she's ready to meet you at the level you've shown her. Because your silence doesn't just reflect your strength, it invites her to rise to it. And that's a rare and powerful thing. She begins to feel the subtle shift inside her. At first, it's just a passing thought, a fleeting memory of how you made her feel, the steadiness you brought into her life. But over time, that thought starts to grow. It becomes a question: did I really understand him? Did I see the full picture? Or was I too quick to decide? Your silence creates an atmosphere where her doubts can surface, unclouded by noise or defensiveness. Without any input from you, she has only herself to reckon with. And in that quiet reflection, she starts to see what she might have missed. She remembers the way you carried yourself, the way you listened without interrupting, the way you were present without demanding attention. She begins to compare those moments to others she has known. And the truth begins to settle in: not everyone is like you. She starts to realize that your silence wasn't indifference but restraint. It wasn't about giving up, it was about giving space. It was a sign of emotional intelligence, of someone who knows that love cannot be forced, only chosen freely. This realization brings with it a sense of unease. She begins to question herself, not because of guilt, but because of clarity. She starts to wonder if she truly knew what she wanted, or if she was too focused on what she thought she didn't want to see the depth of what you offered. And as those thoughts linger, so does the feeling of your absence. It's not something she can shake easily. It's in the quiet moments, the late-night thoughts, the interactions with others that don't carry the same energy you brought. Suddenly, the rejection doesn't feel as simple as it once did. She's left to grapple with the realization that she didn't just reject a possibility, she rejected a person who respected her enough to let her choose freely and respected himself enough not to chase after validation. What happens when she misses you? As her thoughts evolve, something deeper begins to take root, a sense of longing. Not for someone who will beg for her attention or try to prove their worth, but for someone who doesn't need to. She starts to crave the stability, the quiet strength, and the confidence you displayed without ever having to say a word. She begins to wonder what it would feel like to have that kind of presence back in her life, not as an option, but as a choice she makes wholeheartedly. She might try to distract herself, telling herself that she made the right decision. But the absence of your voice, your energy, your presence lingers. It doesn't fade, it grows. And it's not just about missing you, it's about recognizing the rarity of what she had in you. When she comes back. Eventually, if she does reach out, it won't be out of pity or guilt. It will be because she made a choice. A choice driven by the clarity your silence gave her. And when she does, it will be different. She won't just be returning to what was. She'll be approaching you with a new understanding, a deeper respect for who you are and what you bring into her life. But here's the most important part: your silence wasn't about trying to bring her back. It was never a tactic or a strategy. It was a reflection of your self-worth, your understanding that love and connection must come from mutual choice, not desperation or persuasion. If she comes back, it's because she sees now what she couldn't see before. And if she doesn't, you'll know that you stayed true to yourself. Either way, you win, not because you played a game, but because you valued yourself enough to walk away with dignity. This is the ultimate power of silence. It shifts the dynamic, not through force, but through presence. It allows the truth to emerge, hers, yours, and the reality of what could have been. And that truth? It will always lead to the right outcome, whether it's her realizing she can't let you go, or you moving forward knowing you stayed grounded in your worth. In the end, silence doesn't just speak, it transforms. It's the kind of power that leaves a mark, one that can't be ignored or forgotten. And so, the story completes itself, not with grand gestures or elaborate words, but with the quiet, undeniable truth that silence reveals. Whether she comes back or not, your silence has already done its work. It has shown her, and yourself, what true strength looks like. If she returns, it's not because you chased her. It's because she saw the depth of your value in the space your silence created. She felt the gravity of your absence and realized that your worth was never tied to her decision but to the unwavering respect you hold for yourself. And if she doesn't return? Then you walk forward with your head held high, knowing that you chose self-respect over desperation, dignity over pleading, and authenticity over performance. You've shown her, and the world, that you are someone who doesn't need to convince anyone of your worth because it speaks for itself. In the end, silence is powerful because it gives space for clarity. It allows the truth to emerge, unhindered by noise or emotion. And that truth, no matter how it unfolds, always leads to freedom, freedom to let go, freedom to move forward, and freedom to embrace what's truly meant for you. This is the power of silence. It doesn't chase, it doesn't beg, and it doesn't demand. It simply is. And in its stillness, it creates the space for what is real, what is true, and what is worth keeping. And that is the loudest statement of all.